right. Hello, everyone. So welcome to our virtual event space. My name is Allie. You might recognize me from our Lake Forest Park location. I'm your host for this evening. I am so excited to be introducing Lish McBride and Olivia Waite here to discuss Lish's new book, A Little Too Familiar. But before we get into the good stuff, on behalf of all of us here at Third Place Books, I just want to quickly thank you all so much for tuning in. For those of you who may not know, we are an independent bookstore with 3 locations in the Seattle area. We are having more and more of our events in person, which is very exciting. But our online program is sticking around to connect readers and authors in a virtual space. So thank you all so much for tuning in and buying books. Your support is what makes all of this possible. If you haven't gotten your hands on any books that come up this evening and you would like to, I will be linking books in chat. For those of you in the Seattle area, come on in, grab a copy off the shelf, or you can place an order online and come pick them up in store. Or if you're not local or not leaving the house, we of course do ship. So go ahead and follow those links in chat to our website. While you're on our website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. We have an exciting roster coming up this summer. So if you'd like to stay in touch with our community, you can sign up for a newsletter. It's a weekly update about events and exciting releases and book clubs. And of course, if follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We are at Third Place Books for the quickest updates and recommendations. We even have a TikTok, and we have a pretty good time on social media. So definitely, if you would like to check it out, see if there's anything there for you. So tonight we are here for about an hour, and towards the end we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be either at the top or bottom of your screen. It is different than the chat box, which is great for virtual applause and connecting with each other. I absolutely invite you to share where you're tuning in from in the chat. But when it comes time for questions, do make sure those end up in the Q&A so we can most easily find them. While you're in our chat and question spaces, I do want to remind you to please lead with kindness and refrain from any inappropriate behavior or harassment. And finally, should any technical issues arise, which happens in the world of Zoom, we will work as quickly as we can to resolve them, and we appreciate so much your patience and understanding. Alrighty, so now it is time for all of us to settle in, because without further ado, I am so pleased to welcome our dear friend Lish McBride, aspiring castle owner, former Third Place bookseller, and award-winning author of Hold Me Closer, Necromancer, Necromancing the Stone, Firebug, Pyromantic, the Gender-Swapped Beauty and the Beast retelling Curses, and of course, the book of the evening, but more on that in just a moment. In conversation this evening, I am so pleased to welcome back Olivia Waite, author of the Feminine Pursuit series, who writes historical romance, fantasy, and science fiction, and is the wonderful romance columnist for the New York Times. So the book this evening is Lish's adult debut, A Little Too Familiar, which is full of witches, shifters, ferrets, a phoenix named Dammit, and a little bit of crime. Christina Lauren, who wrote The Unhoneymooners, called it a knock it out of the park. Magic on every page, delight. And she is totally right. I'm like obsessed with this book right now. So thank you all so much for being here. Audience members, do not be shy in the chat or if you need anything. And with that, I'm going to pass the stage to our authors. So welcome, both of you. The stage is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. Always wonderful. Lish, can you believe that over 10 years ago, you and I were standing at Third Place Books, possibly at the register together, talking about romance and sci-fi and paranormal stuff?
Time doesn't make any sort of sense to me anymore. Like I have to do pandemic math. I'm like, I just saw you a year ago. Okay, add 3 years.
Right.
It's like it's all now. So
yeah, it's just like Groundhog Day. It's the same day over and over and over.
God, I knew 10 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
10 years. We've made it longer than some marriages. Look at us.
Yeah, that's true. That's how I knew it was over 10 years, is I'm like, wait a minute. Because I met you right around the time that I got married, and that was well over 10 years ago. So, all right. A Little Too Familiar. First off, Allison said she was obsessed with this book. I am also obsessed with this book. This was just a wonderful read. I love paranormal romance, but it's kind of fallen out of favor in terms of the market in the past few years. And luckily, we're now seeing a bunch of new paranormals kind of rise up. We're seeing a lot of witchy books. We're seeing a few more interesting shifters show up. And like, what I liked about this one was that it felt so grounded and lived in. Can you tell me when you first thought of writing a paranormal romance?
I mean, it's a genre I really love. Like, I do love to read it, and that's one thing that drives me crazy about the market. And one thing I do like about indie is that even if the market says, you know, witches aren't in right now, indie's like, we have some. It's like, you, no matter what, my readers' needs are getting met. But for writing one, honestly, at first I was going to try to do like a contemporary, because I was world building for Curses, and I love world building, but also I was exhausted because I'd rewritten that book a billion times, and I had to keep, you know, evolving the magic and everything to make it sense. So I'm like, I'm gonna do something without any of that. Like, I'm just gonna do a contemporary. And I tried, and I was like, this is not working. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to plot things that don't have magic. And so I was like, you know what, forget it. She's a witch now. Like, let's just do this. But it was a lot of fun. But it was definitely like, my avoidance of world building did not work. Like, that didn't happen.
Well, why would you avoid something that's so clearly one of your greatest talents? I mean, that's my question.
I do love it.
Well, you're super good at it. Like, it's world building is hard. I am picky about my world building. I do think contemporaries like have a world building component that, like, I mean, that's why Dickens doesn't use telephones, right? Like, because he's building a contemporary world as he sees it.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's funny. It's like, I'm actually teaching a class on magic for Hugo House, I think in August. And part of the thing I'm sure we'll talk about is that there is definitely world building in contemporary, because you still have to create the people and everything that goes into it. And try to get like your version of, or your character's version of what like that city looks like, what that neighborhood looks like, because we all see it differently. But magic has to rest on that. I mean, if you don't get this part right, if you don't get the contemporary day-to-day stuff, especially if it's anything like urban or paranormal, they're not going to buy your magic. Like, if this world doesn't make sense, then they're not gonna take that leap with you. And so you're, no matter what, I mean, there's world building. I don't know why I thought like I needed a break, and clearly I can't take one. So
I mean, I think you did. You just needed a different kind of break. I mean, this book feels so specifically not just Seattle, but like North Seattle. And I mean, partly that's because I grew up in Linwood. So I'm like, oh, you tell me Briar Creek, and I know that's a made up name, but I know exactly like which grocery stores you're going to, and I know what this animal clinic looks like. It's on the side of Highway 99 next to all the like coffee shops and the karaoke place.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like, I when I moved to Seattle, I lived North End, which I still but the vet, I did work at a vet clinic when I was much younger, was actually in a small town. It was a rural vet. Like, we had a big animal vet there. So sometimes you'd pull into the parking lot and there'd just be a horse. Or like, sometimes I had we'd have to deal with like a pig. Like, there was one time where we had one come in and it was huge. I mean, it was just giant.
Pigs are enormous.
This was like 500 pounds. Yeah. It was a lot.
They're
and it was sedated. And the vet was like, you need to bring it back to the back room. And I was like, I am not a big person, and that is a very large, I can't do that. Even with, he's like, well, grab somebody. I'm like, even with, we're not big people. Like, you lift weights, you have more upper body strength than it. Can you give us a hand? He's like, no, figure it out. And so we ended up like rolling this giant pig onto a blanket and dragging it into the back. I mean, because we're trying to also like make sure the pig is fine. Like, we get it back there and he's like, oh, that's really big. I was like, that is, yes, it is, sir. It is a very large. But they used to get a kick out of me working there because I look a lot like I do now, except I think my hair was shorter and blue. And so to see me like leading the goat back, I thought that was funny.
Yeah. No, you could really like, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just babbling.
No, I'm still in love with the opening at this, like at the magical vet clinic. That's such a, I just wanted to go and sit in the waiting room and eavesdrop, like, which I got to do. But there was something about it that just felt, everybody wants magic to be about the world ending and about, saving a nation or saving the kingdom. And like, there's this sense that everybody talks about the hero's journey in fantasy way too much. And one of the things that I like about paranormal romance is it can be just ordinary and lived in. And here's just somebody's life. And yes, they have magical talents, but they're grappling with those and with their magical job in the same way that the rest of us do.
Yeah, I mean, I love the big stories too. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like,
Yeah.
any of those, the big, what was it, the Alona Andrews, like the Hidden Legacy series. I mean, that's a big,
that's huge.
Everything,
yeah.
And I'm here for it. But this one, I think I just wanted to explore that. Like, what is their day-to-day life looks like? Like, how does it help, but also how does magic complicate
exactly
and make everything much harder?
Yeah, like if you're a cafe and you sell magical things, but you also sell regular coffee, how do you keep those separate? Like, are there different skills involved? One of them is clearly going to take more energy to make. And yet magic always has to have a cost if you're doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm still kind of stunned by this book. I just finished it last night and it was exactly the hug I needed. I love Dammit and the pigeons and just, so can we talk about, we should talk about animals because this book is absolutely chock full of animals. It's got wolf shifters that are not your typical alpha male dynamics. It's not the dominance and submissive thing. Do you want to talk more about that?
So, and again, I always want to make it clear that like, I'm not disparaging any of that. Like I love all the werewolf books. I really do.
So much with it, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so much mythology and stuff to go off of, which I just reordered my books, but I've got like a whole shelf that's like just shapeshifter mythology. But this one, I wanted to kind of go off of kind of the more natural wolf packs, because a lot of the books that we have now, like the theories of like the alpha and stuff, the way that it's structured was based more on a study that they did of captive wolves. And of course, captive wolves don't act like.
No,
it's like if you did it.
Wolves in prison.
Yeah, wolves in prison.
Yeah.
And so in the wild, it is more around like the family structure, and so the alpha is also like the parent couple, that the two alpha pairs. It's and so there is of course that protective everything, but there's also the like, I've got to teach you. I've got to make sure you're okay. Is everyone fed? Is everyone taken care of? And
yes, the nurturing.
There's something sort of weirdly, I mean, not only just fun, but also funny about putting those two things together. Like I
am a big, strong, semi-immortal, quick healing, muscle-bound wolf shifter. Sit down. I'm going to cook for everybody.
I've packed you
a lunch with your name. Yeah.
Are you hydrated? I don't know. It did make me miss my old roommates, honestly. Like there was a lot of I always lived in houses full of people in my early 20s. And so we had the animal thing. I always have animals in my book. I like animals. And this one, I had an excuse to put in as many as I wanted. So I did. And I have no regrets. The pigeons were super funny to write. I really enjoyed the pigeons. And I had to do a little bit of, it's funny because like the research doesn't always show up on the page, but like you have to know. And so I had to look up some stuff on pigeons, and I didn't really get to deep dive into pigeons, but I learned some stuff about them, which like I had to look up if they could recognize faces. We've done studies on that, which they absolutely can. Yeah, they're actually, I mean, I think more people know like how smart crows and everything are, but pigeons are actually like, they're
pretty
up there.
I mean, they're semi-domesticated, so they had to be kind of smart, right? You don't domesticate real dumb animals. I mean, I guess sheep, but
so they can definitely recognize faces, and I think they communicate with each other similarly to crows, because crows will, like, if they see a person that's a jerk to other crows, they'll tell all the crows, and they'll remember you. and they never forget. They'll pass that knowledge on.
No, you become crow legend.
Not in a good way. You don't want that. But so I got to do some fun research on pigeons. I already knew a lot about ferrets, so I didn't have to do much there. But that was my specialty when I worked at the vet clinic.
Was ferrets?
Was ferrets.
Did you ever have one of your own?
Mhm.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I
didn't
did.
know that.
Her name was Trouble. It was when I was a kid, and it was my aunt found her. Like, she had a floral shop that she worked at, and someone had dumped the ferret because it was a it's a military town, and there's a lot of like people that adopt pets and then have to move quickly, and sometimes
So
like
they just leave the pet.
sometimes, yeah, it would just kind of. So she found it. So basically, this ferret had been hand raised by my aunt, and she gave it to me, and so it was just the sweetest thing. And it was really funny because we had a Newfoundland at the time, so it's this huge dog. They're like Saint Bernard size, these giant dogs. The dog was terrified of like this 2-pound ferret. So the dog would just stay like this, and the ferret would just hop around cleaning her. I'm like, hey, I could do it. Like, just really friendly. And
the dog's like, it's on me. I should not move.
Exactly. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Weirdly, that was my specialty. All kinds of weird knowledge in my head at this point.
Well, it comes through. I had a friend who worked at a vet that did a lot of work with ferrets in high school. And it's hard to see realistic ferrets on the page. You don't get to enjoy that very much in fiction, if I find.
They get into stuff. You have to proof your house.
Oh, they're super villains when they want to be.
Yeah, you have to be careful. We would lose Trouble on the regular, but she had a squeaker that she would respond to. So if I couldn't find her, I had to sit there and squeak it, and she'd come out. And I'd snatch her. But I miss having them, honestly. I sometimes would do fostering and stuff with them too when I was younger. But it's been a while.
Yep. So I believe this book is the start of a series.
Hope so. I mean, so far everyone seems on board with that. I've had several messages from friends and also just people I know on the internet just saying like, so there's more, right? Which is really, that's what we want. That's always what we want.
That was my first question when I finished, is I'm like, Lish better tell me this is a series. Like, I will be mad. And if there's not, you have to tell me exactly what happens to everybody.
The upside of knowing writers. I mean, it doesn't always get you in, but like I read one of my friend's books. Oh God, what is time? A couple of months ago, I think, maybe, whenever it came out. But it was Kendare Blake's All These Bodies, and it's kind of an open-ended book. Like, you could read the ending different ways. Yeah. And so I mean, I loved it. It's sort of this cool true crime meets vampire hysteria kind of YA.
Oh yeah.
Slowly creepy, wonderful book. But I get to the end, and so I messaged her. I was like, so like, you know how it ended, right? Like the real ending? She's like, yeah. I'm like, well, you're gonna tell me, yeah? She's like, no. Like,
oh, that's mean.
But she's like, I didn't even tell my husband. Like,
oh, well, at least she's consistently mean.
She is. But I'm like, what if it's like in 10 years? Will you tell me? Like, yeah, it's gonna drive me crazy. So sometimes like it doesn't matter if you have an in, but for the most part, usually you can message somebody like, hey, so there's more books, or get the inside.
So this couple's next, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I had some very specific demand emails, like, so I want this book.
Yeah. Well, who is Trick's nemesis?
Oh God.
Because you have to either give them a book or you have to ruin the nemesis in some way.
I mean, I've been trying to decide how I want to do that one. Oh God, what was his name? McAllister? It's McAllister. I am bad at
something like McAllister. I can never remember.
Names.
No, I decide on them and then I think, great, that's solved. And then it's like once I put it on the page, it doesn't have to live here anymore.
Exactly. Well, there's some real truth to that. Like that's we lost some of our ability to memorize with the invention of like the printing press and stuff, because now we don't have to remember anymore. So it's gone.
Oh, and not just the printing press. It's like you go back to the invention of writing in ancient Greece, and you can find Plato complaining that the kids don't know how to memorize properly anymore because they're just writing things down like lazy millennials, like it was first century millennial, but like, and that's not the right time period, but the joke was too good.
No, I know. Well, it's funny too, because like I have a lot of friends that are millennials and not a single one of them are lazy. Like they're amazing people that make me feel lazy. So, but that's not, it's inaccurate.
Yeah.
No, I'm bad. I forget names all the time, especially if I've changed them a bunch. I don't think I
Yeah.
changed that one more than once, but like Trick's name was changed. It was something else.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, you know, you go in there, you have a name, and you're like, all of a sudden you realize you have three names that start with L or something, and you have to go back
Yep.
and change it. Yeah. The
I
weird
did have
stuff.
I had a copy editor once come to me in book 2 of a series and say, well, you've named this side character John something in 19th century England, or like it was Thomas. So you've named this side character Thomas something in 19th century England, but in book 1, you had a completely separate character, only mentioned in one scene, who was also named Thomas. Do you think the reader's going to get confused? And I'm like, have you ever looked at a list of English village names? There's like 25 Johns. There's only so much we can do.
Yep.
Like, yeah,
it's funny.
I'm okay with stat.
I had to do that though once. Like I turned in like a draft to my agent, and he said, "Okay, it was a little walk-on character, just like there for 2 paragraphs." And he's like, "You need to change this character's name." And I was like, "Why? What's wrong with Owen?" And he's like, "You don't see a problem?" I said, "No, he's your main villain in the last book. Same name, Owen. Yeah, no, okay." I was like, "Right,
We're like, oh yeah,
right."
no, we
Once it's
should.
once it's done, my brain just dumps the info. Like I remember some basics, but I remember more about other people's books that I read sometimes. It's like,
Well, but that's because that's something you're taking in. Whereas with a book, like it's something you generate and you're keeping so much of it in your head at various points. Like you're keeping the overall plot, you're keeping the character arcs, you're keeping the how it should look, the big sparkly perfect castle in the air of it, and the way it like you then of course, you know, the gap between that and how it ends up looking on the page, which is like, you know, beautiful architect's blueprints and scribbled pile of twigs and brick, you know.
we have to, like, I always have to have that discussion with my students. So there's a difference between the book in here versus the book on the page. Like you'll think all the time that like I thought of this thing and I've definitely put it on there. You probably have it like 50. And that's why giving it to readers or copy editors or other people to look at it to catch those things. Because in your head, like this is flawless, beautiful thing. And to them, they're like, nope, it's very rickety and it's missing all these pieces. It's like
and
something
like,
built that
what happened with this thing? And you're like, oh no, that's totally on the page. And then you go to the page and it is not in fact there.
But it gets worse too, like the more you rewrite or edit some things, then you can't remember if you cut stuff or
See, this is where like I've been doing the synopsis, like a big long synopsis before I start a draft. And weirdly, it feels like the synopsis becomes a first draft and I get comfortable enough with the story. I had somebody recently ask me for a bullet point synopsis of a very complicated mystery novel with a spy theme.
Mm-hmm.
And I banged it out in less than a day. It's like from memory, like I just sat down and I'm like, oh yeah, it goes like this. And it's because I'd been sitting there with that synopsis for 3 months, shuffling things around and tweaking it and filling plot holes and like, and I felt like a champion and nobody will ever know.
Like, but I've never been able to do that because a lot of times I don't know what's going to happen until this. Actually, my process has horrified a lot of people. Like some of my friends that are like they sit down and they do the outline or I'll put things on note cards. That's all great, and I kind of wish I could do it. But it's like, so you just like sit down and just type things. Yes, I just sit down and type things.
But but that's the organic approach. I actually admire that because you can get some real surprises that way that are very hard to plan for.
It's also a bit of a nightmare, and you have to very much trust that your brain's going to cough something up, which it doesn't.
Well, I mean, your brain's going to do that anyways. You can make the most perfect synopsis in the world, and it goes wrong as soon as you start to actually try and make it happen.
Yeah, for sure.
So somehow writing defeats you no matter what your strategy is.
I know, and it's I think a lot of new writers too think that the more that they do it, like it'll get easier.
No, it gets different hard.
It gets different hard. And in some ways, it's because I think like there are some reassurances. I've done this before. I know I can do it again, kind of thing. But there's also that each book is different, and you start to, I think, sometimes overthink it. Some of the like I've taught writing workshops, everything from like 3rd graders to grown-ups, retirees and everything. And
Mhm.
I always had a lot of fun doing the writing classes, like the 10-year-olds, like 9 or 10, because they're not second guessing themselves yet. And they're still mostly comfortable with like showing you what they did. And a lot of them would like instinctively, just from reading, know how to do like tone or know how to, I mean, they didn't
Yeah.
necessarily know what to call it, but they knew how to do
But
the
they could
elements.
hear it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then they would turn in this amazing stuff. And then I would get adult readers. No one wants to share anything. No one, is comfortable with that. And like it just, and they will talk themselves out of something that at one point came very naturally to them. And some of that is just, we go through, as we grow up, we start to go through that process where people start to critique you. And if they don't do it in a helpful way and they don't do it in a supportive way, it can sort of crush any confidence that you have or some of your creativity. And it's like I feel like now half the time I'm teaching, half of it is actual writing, and the other half is just getting you to trust yourself again after the abuse you've had over the years from usually well-meaning people.
Usually well-meaning people, yeah, but they'll say something like just some casual observation and it will devastate you for a decade.
Even if you know it's wrong.
Even if you know it's wrong. Like
I've had people say something, so I'm like, you don't even understand how books work. Like I don't know what to tell you. But it'll still, if you like, because I don't respond, especially on the internet. But you know this, people come up to your face and tell you things.
Okay, you can get away with the occasional factual correction, like actually the scene you're looking for begins on page 327. Like, and then you step away and you make no value judgment. Just you may have missed this detail. But that's all. And that's only in really like seriously libelous kind of circumstances, like not, oh, this person missed a thing. Oh, this random Goodreads account like skipped something by accident. And I'm like, no, life is hard for all of us. They do not need to argue.
It's a waste of everyone's time, as far as I'm concerned. But it definitely my brain wants to argue. Where it's like I have a dissertation and it takes me a while to let it go sometimes. I'm like, it's not going to do any good. And of course, like it's not. And people say like, well, of course you want to argue if someone doesn't like it. I'm like, no, I've wanted to argue with good positive reviews where I'm like, okay, like you loved it, but also you're wrong. But also you love it. So it's like, well,
yeah, that is really excruciating when someone says, oh, this is great because XYZ, and I'm like, yeah, that's not happening like at all.
I love these elements. Those elements are not in my story. What were you reading?
Yeah,
not in my story.
I guess
it's funny, but like I've had people just in talk. It's like they forget that I worked on a book for a year, however much time, and they'll just tell you it's like a book club. Like there's no emotional attachment to it. So they'll just tell you to your face, like the problems that they had or issues or it's like, well, all right. Thanks.
You are allowed to think that. Congratulations.
I don't know why you told me, but here we are.
It's hard. I get a little torn because I'm a reviewer as well as an author. I actually am blocked by an author, at least one. There's one I know of. I'm blocked by an author on Twitter because when I started my column, I would tag each author I mentioned because it wasn't just me on a blog. It was me in a literary outlet, and people should know what that review said. Even if it's bad, like this is a not insignificant platform and like people should know. And I said something, the review was something like, well, I really enjoyed it, but I had this question because supposedly this is a very powerful, dominant character, but we don't see her actually choose to do anything. And she has all these fears that don't really make any sense. I really liked the writing and I enjoyed the characters, but I just was puzzled by this and blocked. And I'm like, and everybody's like, oh, don't tag the author in negative reviews. And I'm like, see, and the problem is, how do you define a negative review?
Yeah.
Like, we've all got the story. This book has too much sex and like A+ negative review. Everybody wants that review.
Yeah. Well, it's for me, it's the I don't mind getting tagged in professional, something that's like, if it's going to be New York Times,
like a professional or a trade
cool library journal or something like that, like cool, tag me, it's fine. When it's people just having their feelings, which are valid feelings, like I don't, it's things I'm like, you don't necessarily, you don't need me to get in that conversation. Or sometimes they'll tag me and then I'll respond to something
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, like, I can't believe like you started, like, well, you tagged me.
Well,
Like,
you tugged on my elbow at the cocktail party.
yeah. Because like for me, even positive reviews, I can find them really stressful. So a lot of the times
Yeah.
too, even the trade reviews, unless my agent sends it to me, I don't see it. Because yeah, like it'll be like nine-tenths of it just glowing, and then there's like one line that you're like, what does
And it gets
that
under your
mean?
skin like a splinter, and like, and it's, I think part of the reason why it's so hard is because all that criticism, it's too late. You can't do
Yeah,
anything with that.
go back.
Like, what are we gonna do?
Uh,
And unless it's like a really serious criticism or like an incredible typo. Like, I've seen some incredible typos, and I'm like, okay, that we could fix, but
yeah. Well, for those too, like generally, I don't have control over that. Like I can tell my
yeah,
publisher. I mean, obviously, I can do it with this book, but like other than that, like I can
yeah,
give my
you have to
publisher a
notify
heads up.
somebody who has
But
to notify somebody who has to change the, yeah, it's, and it's
I'm
hard,
also,
and readers don't have an insight into how many people actually help a book become a book. And yeah, that's because that's not a reader's job to know. That's,
they're just there for fun time.
yeah, they're there to do the part of taking the book and bringing it to life. That's their job.
Yeah.
Speaking of too much sex as your adult debut, how is it writing actual full-on romance sex scenes in this one?
I mean,
They
the
were great,
writing
by the
part.
way.
Thank you. There was the concern was giving it to a couple of my friends that actually write in the genre,
Mhm.
like you or Christina Lauren or my friend Molly Harper.
Yeah.
And so anyone you saw on the blurbs, like those lovely people, because you're like, okay, well, you do this already. It's like I was just like, am I gonna get a note back saying like that's not how this works? I did not get that note back, and I was very relieved. But no, I mean the writing part was fine. It's the um sending it out into the world, I think, is the part where you're like, well, because you really, it's such a funny subject for like some people. Like I don't really have any problem talking about it, but like other people get touchy, and you just don't really know how they're going to take it.
Yeah.
Friends and family, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun. Like I think the one thing I like about just romance in general, the whole thing, is that it is so character focused, and it's so kind of into those kind of like deep emotions and everything, and so it is like this kind of deep character study, and so that's all part of it. I mean, but the actual affection and things like that, and also just how they talk to each other. And so that part and seeing it all connected was really fun. It was kind of nice not to have to pan away.
Yeah.
Why you have to pan?
You do have to pan away.
Super good reasons.
Yeah. No, I started in erotic romance. I jumped into the deep end at the start. And so like after 6 erotic romances, I'm like, yeah, I'd like to write a sex scene where I could just like say, and then we banged and it was great. And then moving on. Like, and of course, one answer was I switched from MF to FF, which was a whole new universe. And I'm like, oh, this is fun and interesting. And you can do some different things. And you have to really watch your pronouns now. Like, because you have to be really clear as to which she you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which always fun.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely, like I said, interesting kind of handing it off to people that have known me a long time. Especially, I don't know if you do this, but like if it's someone that I've known a long time and then I pick up their book and I start reading it, sometimes I hear them. Like them talking, like their voice. This was years ago when my friends wrote this kind of gritty mystery, and I was reading it, and I kept picturing him as the main character, even though they're not like described in any way. Him as the main character and his wife as the female.
That's
so,
an
like,
illusion
this is
breaker.
Awkward, and I'm uncomfortable, and there's nothing that they're doing. It was entirely my fault, but it was like,
yeah,
and I guess
I've never had a little bit of that.
It doesn't help that my characters talk like me, and they talk like people that I know, and so that I think makes it harder to get that clean break if you know me well, especially.
No, I can definitely hear your voice in the banter. I guess I don't know. I have maybe it's that I've been reading romance since I was like 5, but my sense of boundaries are like, it just doesn't bug me, I guess.
I'm usually pretty good, but every once in a while something will throw me. If it's a name of someone that's close in my family, like if the male lead is like my eldest son is named Griffin. A lot of people named Griffin in romance for whatever reason. I didn't realize that.
See, and I didn't have to worry about that for a lot. And there's a big romance by an author whose work, that earlier books that I've loved, but one of her later books has a hero named Mitch, which was my dad's name, my late dad's name. And I'm just like, I really want to read it. I liked his character in the first one, but I'm like, emotionally, I need to be on a real steady footing before I go diving in. And I don't think it's even like, I don't think it's even about the sex then. It's because like, we're going to do a real deep dive and it's going to be my dead dad's name over and over and over. And I'm like, yeah, we're gonna just take it a little light on that one. And usually
it's weird the problems you have when reading that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Usually I pretend that nobody I know is actually reading my books either, which, because, you know, especially when I was really starting out, I was writing much steamier stuff than I'm doing for Avon. And I found the easiest way to think about it was pretend somebody else wrote it, and then I could talk about it and I could pitch it and I could market it and just pretend like, oh, I have nothing to do with this. So like a little healthy dissociation.
No, it's just, yeah. And but the thing is, like, my family, especially the McBride side of my family, we are a chatty bunch. And we are in every, like, I know everything that's going on with even family I don't see very frequently. Like we talk. And so I was surprised how many of them like messaged, hey, I got your book. And I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, I would get updates, you know, phone calls, let me know like what they thought of it. And like they've all actually really loved it, been very supportive. But again, you never know. I
had somebody do it to me when it was my first book. It had just come out. We were on a trip with a bunch of friends. We were in an airport, and a friend of mine turns to me and he says, hey, I'm going to read your book right now. And I'm like, in public while I watch? And he's like, what? It's a book. I've got my e-reader. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that feels way more kinky and voyeuristic than anything you're going to find in that erotic romance. Like,
it's a weirdly vulnerable thing. And like this used to happen to me a lot at the bookstore because I worked in a bookstore and I had friends be like, oh, I know you. So they'd be sitting next to me reading the book. So I'm like, so I had to get a little bit used to it. But the I had a fight with my husband once, which we don't fight very frequently, and this one was entirely my fault. But my second book, we were a little rushed getting it in, so like no one had read it. Like I didn't have really any beta reads, nothing. Which
and that was Necromancing the Stone.
Necromancing the Stone, and so I was really nervous about it. And he sits down next to me and he's like, you know, I'm gonna finish your book. Got about 2 chapters left. So he finished the book and said, all right, good night, and he went to bed. And I lost it. Like I had a meltdown. Yeah, it was not pretty.
Well, it's like, oh look, here's a sore spot, pokety 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 pokety. Like
when I made the mistake, and this is like I posted something on Facebook about like that he's a monster, and he rightfully was like, I don't really appreciate. He's like, well, he didn't realize no one ever. I'm like, Adam, no one ever. And he's like, oh, okay. He had no idea. Again, all on me. It was entirely my fault. But it was a good lesson learned because I'm like, I will never do that again. You're correct. I'm so sorry. And next time, if something is important, like no one has read this, I would like to hear.
You front load that.
Please let me know. It was hilarious. Like it was just, it was this mess that I had to do a lot of penance for, entirely on me.
Yeah, it's stressful though. Like handing a book to somebody who's a reader who you don't know is kind of fun and easy. You're like, oh yeah, you want historical romance, I write those, here you go. Handing it to, and I'm gonna have to look at this person over breakfast every morning, and like it's a way scarier thing.
And I don't know if you've ever had this problem, but like especially early on, getting some of my family to understand that I was not writing them into something, or that I was making stuff up, that it wasn't things that had happened to me.
Yeah, I
That was
actually,
kind of a thing.
I had my mom accuse me of doing that when I was like 10. So I got that particular traditional writer bruise real early. Like,
Yeah, no, it happened a lot. And I had a short story that I wrote in grad school, and my brother read it, and it was about this young woman who finds out that her partner's cheating on her. Pretty standard grad school MFA stuff.
Standard conflict,
And
yeah.
yeah. And my brother's like, so who do I need to beat up? And I was like, what? And he's like, well, I read your story. I'm like, that wasn't me. Like, that's not.
It's the fiction, man.
My degree is in fiction. That means I make things up.
Yep.
But thank you for your support.
I mean, at least he was on your side, you know?
Yeah, they're good like that.
All right, so we are just about the quarter of an hour, and it looks like we have one chat in the Q&A. If anybody has other questions, pop them right in the Q&A. We're going to start with the first one, which is, this is going to be a fun one. What motivates you to write?
It is a fun one, because on one hand, it's sort of like, well, bills motivate me to write, but also, even if that wasn't true, because obviously I wrote even when no one paid me for it. I don't know, like it's something I've always done, and I do know that if I don't write, I become very grouchy, and I'm not very good to be around. There's some sort of process, like some sort of emotional runoff that happens writing that if I'm not doing it, it's real clear. No one wants to be around me at that point. So yeah, I think even when I was younger, like I made up stories all the time. And if I'm not in front of my laptop, I'm still making up stories. So I'm not actually sure what the drive is, but it's there. And so it's hard to explain that to people. Like I'll have students all the time where they're like, well, I haven't, the muse hasn't struck. I'm like, well, the muse, you can't wait for that. You have to just sit down.
Yeah, you have to, you kind of have to have the engine turning.
So I don't know. It's just something that I have to do, or my family will kick me out, I guess. That's not entirely true, but like, I don't know. What is it? Do you have something specific for you that motivates you to write, or?
Well, for me, I think it started when I was really little. I think for me, it was an offshoot of being read stories to when I was a kid. And so, you know, I've never been good at sleeping. And so I find I sleep better, and especially when I was little. You know, your parents would read to you, and then you'd get sleepy, and you would be calm, and you would sleep. But then there'd be times when I would wake up in the middle of the night, or when I wouldn't fall asleep right away. And I'm like, oh, well, now I'm just laying here in the dark, feeling scared and alone. Well, what do I do? So I would start imagining stories. Like, I'm sure it started as me just like going through the books that I already had memorized when I was like 5 or whatever, you know every picture book by heart by then. And then it kind of evolved into reimagining stories that I'd read, or imagining new things based a lot on fairy tales and Greek mythology. And there were a lot of shipwrecks in the stories I told myself as a kid, because I thought shipwrecks were the coolest thing. And you can probably blame a lot of fairy tales for that.
Well, it's funny because like I feel like we all have the things that we return to in our, like, there's definitely elements that always show. There's always animals in mine, stuff like that. When I returned to my first book as a thesis defense, it was, there's a lot of hot chocolate. Do you drink a lot of? I'm like, actually, no, I don't drink a lot of hot chocolate. My friend, her thesis was full of cheese. Everyone kept eating cheese. It was great. I was like, well, if you're gonna get a complaint, I mean, how can you have too much cheese? But I did the same thing. Like I'm also a poor sleeper, and so I would tell myself stories. And except having someone read to me wasn't always soothing. I had one parent that would check if I was awake, and so would make up, like, all of a sudden,
just veers wildly off course.
Yeah, I'd be like, and then a curious kitten was hit by a Mack truck. And I was like, no. Like, oh,
this is why you're a horror. This is why you're a horror writer, isn't it?
Yeah,
like
a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, that's not. I feel like there are other ways to see if I'm awake. That's not one of them. And so yeah, like they would do that, which I'm like, I feel like you're defeating your purpose. If you're trying to get me to go to sleep, because now I'm waiting for it. Like I'm waiting
Yeah.
to see what what changes
And
you're
now you're tense, and that's no way to go to bed.
Yeah, I don't read my books like that to my kids.
Yeah, so for me, it definitely started as like a kind of a coping mechanism. And then in school, you starting young, but also going all the way up through high school, you'd be in a lecture and you'd already understand the stuff, or you would be super bored by the topic and you're taking notes. And those notes kind of start to wander. The next thing you know, you have like 6 verses of the worst poetry you've ever read in your life, but you think it's brilliant because you're 12. And then and it just became kind of the thing that I did. And then it became just a habit that my brain fell into. So my brain collects thoughts and impressions, and you'll look at a tree, or like there was one time we were driving, and this was after I was married, I think, or very close to when I got married. We were driving down a road to go to, like, we were visiting somebody's relatives, or we were driving to the marina where the boat was, kind of a thing. And we drove by a giant pile of sawdust. And as we drove by, I looked out the window, and a big chunk of that sawdust tumbled to the bottom of the pile. And within the next 30 seconds, I had like the complete start to finish plot for a YA second world fantasy about glaciers and yetis, and I won't even get into all the details, but it was like just this one little motion. And I'm like, well, what if X? Well, then bam. And so like something about your brain, it takes in all of this raw material and it tries to like flatten it out and weave it together into like some sort of product so that it doesn't pile up, I guess.
It makes sense of things. And that's a lot of it. But I think too, they've done so much where they talk about how important boredom is for creativity. Yes. Like being stuck somewhere. Like I wrote stories in class all the time, and all those things too. But and it's funny how many writers have learned to almost like trigger that response. So if you talk to them, they'll be like, "Oh, if I'm stuck, I take a walk."
Yep.
Where like something where,
or I take a shower, or I take a bath, or
napping is part of my process. Things like that, and which they are. All those things are something where some tasks where your brain can go elsewhere while your hands are doing something, or sort of cultivating that sort of boredom response. Which I think
I wonder if that's partly how stories started in humans in general, is we had all this stuff that our hands had to be doing all the time, but we'd evolved these big giant brains that needed occupation as well, and stories were kind of like the fidget that came out of that.
And I very much have like that squirrel brain where it just chases off after what's that? What's that?
Somebody says something interesting in the middle of a conversation, and I will like snap back to earth 5 minutes later going, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yep. It's terrible. Like my family too, like sometimes my husband has gotten particularly good at like noticing when he's like, are you like, come back? Like, where did you go? I think we have another question. Do you have a favorite character?
Ooh, good question.
I mean, there's always one that's more fun to write, but like it tends to be, I mean, I like all of them, otherwise I wouldn't. Even villains can be fun.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about villains is like their goals are so clear. Like they know exactly what they want. They just don't care what gets in the way of that. Like that's kind of what makes them villain, is like they don't have any scruples of going after that thing. Favorite character. I mean, they're all different for certain. There's certain ones I like to write, I guess, better. In Firebug, I loved writing Ezra because he's just this gorgeous, over the top, ridiculous person with the best heart, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Sam, I liked writing because he was this from Hold Me Closer. He's so kind. Like kindness is kind of what motivates him all the time. Which sounds
like a nice mind to inhabit.
It is, and it's funny because like when I first turned in Firebug, and Ava's very different. She's very sarcastic, and she hasn't had the support system that Sam has had. Like she hasn't had that sort of. It mean you train people to be kind. Like we're not naturally think like that. She hasn't had that training. She has like no social anything, and does not know how to people very well. So yeah, she's snarky and everything. And I turned it in, and my agent goes, "This it must be nice for you to like write something that's like closer to you. That's easier. It's less of a stretch. Like Ava's more where you're at." And I was like, I feel like that's. I know you didn't mean it to be sort of a backhanded compliment. It's a little bit. But it's also accurate. So I'm like, well, yeah. Because he's like, Sam's just so nice. I was like, maybe stop talking now.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between kind and nice, right?
Yeah.
And like, Ava's not nice, but deep down, she's probably
She
kind.
means well. Like she tries. She just like again, and she's I think a little bit younger than Sam too. And so she's kind of coming from more of a deficit, less in the toolbox, and teenagers already don't have a lot in the toolbox to work with.
Yeah. Well, they're just building the toolbox. Yeah,
that's what that year's for. For the new book, I favorite characters for the new book. Will is always really fun. I love Will. Which is funny. My husband is convinced Will's based on him. He hasn't read the book yet. He's still. I mean, he's not. There's definitely like I stole some of his stories from work for sure because there's things in this book.
I mean, because it's a tattoo shop.
Part of the reason why I had to write an adult book was I had at this point so many stories from him. I'm like, I just need to use these because they're too good. But yeah, he's fun and goofy.
Which transitions into our next question, which is how much fun did you have writing this?
It was a lot of fun. Editing it sucked. Editing it was really hard. But actual drafting was probably the most fun I'd had in a while. And part of that was because there was no expectations on it. I was just working on this for fun and, entertaining myself. And a lot of it was drafted during kind of like lockdown. And so I think there was just, I just wanted something fun where everyone is trying to help each other and be nice. Not nice. You're right. It's not the same as kind, but be kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, just basically just let myself be as goofy as I wanted to be, which is great. That part was great.
It was an absolute breath of fresh air. I read a lot of romance and I read a lot of like ensemble romance, and it's really rare for me to find a book where I'm just like, I just want to step into this world and just live there for a little bit. This feels like it's not perfect. It's not amazing. It's like every time I read a Casey McQuiston book, I want to go to all the parties she describes. And yours, I want to go to all their movie nights. I want to watch, what was it? It wasn't The Princess Bride they were watching. What was it they were watching for like the 15th time?
Oh, it might have been. Well, Will at one point wants to watch Strictly Ballroom.
That's the one.
Wait, yeah.
Yeah, it's Strictly Ballroom. I love that movie.
Great movie. And it was one that my roommate Devin loved a lot. Like that was one that she liked. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to actually sit down and watch it. Even though like we have a lot of overlap on taste. But it's such a good movie. It's just so weird and
it's like it's Baz Luhrmann, but before he had the budget, all he had was like a camera to try and be extra with, and he really kind of pulls it off.
It's so extra. And I did, I love that.
Coca-Cola sign, like there's no reason that's
so much. It's the dance scenes, it's so good. I mean, the whole thing. Well, a lot of my friends, it's what we did. We watched movies. And so at this point, my knowledge base of those is ridiculous. And for a long time too, like when I first moved to Seattle, I started dating my husband. He worked in a video store, and so did 3 out of 4 of his roommates. So we'd go to their house, and it'd be like my bookcases, but with DVDs. That's what we did. It's a movie goofy, so it's got.
Yeah, I miss having a pile of people on the couch and people yelling things at the screen, watching something that everybody's seen, so you don't have to miss plot points.
Yeah, and it's what we used to do. So in this is one of the things I missed about New Orleans was we would do bad movie night, and some of my friends were screenwriters, and so like they could always add a layer. And so yeah, we would try to find sometimes just going off the cover, and every once in a while you get a movie that was actually legitimately great. Out of that, it's like one of them, my roommate brought home Black Sheep, which is a New Zealand horror comedy about killer sheep. And he's like, I brought him the cover and he's like, I don't know what this is. It could be terrible, it could be great. We're watching it. And we're watching it and I'm like, I love this. I love this so much. Like it is honestly one of my favorite films. It is like you have to have a strong stomach because it's definitely Ouida does
one of those, yeah.
Yeah, and they do really good effects. And so there's some really just gross stuff in it. But I love that movie. And so yeah, like I miss movie night. I don't really get to do that anymore. I'm with my family, I guess. But
yeah, but like that's different.
Yeah.
And Charles and I, it's been just Charles and me. We've had exactly one person besides us who sat on the couch in the past almost 3 years. And it's just like it's a bummer.
I mean, it's it's something my family did too. I mean, it's something that drives like my sister-in-law is crazy is when you get all like me and my brothers together, we revert to childhood, which is we just quote movies at each other. That's all we do. And they find it really Adam can hang because my husband, because he's, also a movie nerd. But we were so bad as kids, we could recite the entire Top Gun script.
See, Charles needs to know this fact.
I can't do it now, but that was something as kids we could like. Because we lived in a small town,
and that's all you had to do.
Yeah. So when we watched movies, and my mom loves movies, it was just one of those things that we all did. And so yeah, we get together now, and it's awful. Like we can't stop, and it just drives them crazy.
Yeah, well, it's become a pattern, and you can't like not do the whole pattern.
Yeah.
Hi.
Allie's back.
I'm back. Sorry to interrupt, but we are about at time. So I'm going to ask one last question before we say good night. And it's what's on the horizon? What's next? Or where should we find you?
We can find me. I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm on Twitter and I respond to things, but I don't hang out because it's terrible. But I have a lot of friends on there, so I don't want to get rid of it. I have some good conversations, but I try not to soak in the Twitter. But I'm on there and Instagram, and I'm mostly a lurker on TikTok, but it's all under my name, which makes it really easy. Just Lish McBride. I have a website and newsletter and things. Immediately is next. I come in tomorrow to sign more of these.
Hey,
for third place, send out.
The cover is stunning, by the way.
And
Vlad made the
Vlad, who always does my bookmarks and stickers, did Fluff But Fierce, our little sticker for Dammit. It's super cute. And the cover, Jenny at what's Seedlings? I think it's seedlings.com.
Yeah.
She did the cover. She was amazing to work with, and I think did such a good job. Like it just turned out exactly how I want. I love it a lot.
It's so cute. It's so good.
And usually, like, you don't get say over your cover, so that was kind of a nice to have so much. It was actually almost a little overwhelming.
The fun thing about self-pub is actually like,
After tomorrow, let's see. I've got some other events coming up. I'm working on the follow-up to this book. I'm usually writing more than one book at a time. That's a thing that I do. And so I'm working on like the next YA one, which is a bit in limbo. This one and a few other sort of little things. But mostly I'm kind of focused on this one right now. But that's what's going on with me. What are you up to, Olivia?
I have a few things that are looking for homes right now, which is very exciting. And I'm slowly building
when you
those.
say exciting,
Well, yes. By which I mean hideous. But yeah, it's always rough to be on submission, and this is the widest submission I've ever been on, and it's possibly the worst time to be on submission that any author or agent has ever seen. Like, it's hard out there.
I was actually talking to one of my students now she's got her book out for submission.
Mhm.
It's been like 3 weeks, and she was like, "Is that a long time?" And I was like, "Well, right now, time is meaningless because editors like they're sitting on books for a year."
Yeah, because everybody's swamped. Supply chains are a mess. Books are being pushed out. Like it's all cascading down. So this has been real fun. But I have been consoling myself by coming up with more and better things to write. So that's fun. So there's some really exciting things that I hope to get to tell people about. And in the meantime, my guiding light is that I have the column in the New York Times, which is so fun to write. And there's going to be another one coming out soon. You can find that I still can't believe I get to say this. You can find that on the New York Times. I do lurk a lot on Twitter where you can see me correcting people who are wrong about Persuasion, and getting mad at people who are wrong about the Odyssey, and usually retweeting whatever romance and queer romance crosses my feed that I think needs boosting. So I actually have a pretty good time on Twitter. So I block liberally and retweet a lot of books. So it's fun.
And that's those are the aspects that I'm there for. But when I'll start to feel overwhelmed, so I'm just reading through the feed. I'm like, nope, I'm gonna go read a book instead and feel better.
That is the correct thing to do, because Twitter is also like the doom scrolling temptation is real. But yes, newsletter, website, Twitter. You can find, if you go to oliviawaite.com, it has links to all the places where I am on social. So, and it has the newsletter sign up as well. The newsletter is very infrequent, but it's always really, I basically find all of my favorite pieces of research and articles and weird 19th century machines, the history of electrified clothing, things like that, all goes into the newsletter. So,
I love your newsletter because I'm signed up for it because exactly for that reason, like all the research. And I'm signed up for Rose Lerner on Patreon for the same
Rose
reason.
Lerner,
she does
just
post a lot
exquisite
of
research.
And she was the editor on this book and made it a ton better. But like her research and her ability to research is phenomenal. And so
it is stunning.
I have learned so much from just following her thing. I mean, it's like, and yours too. And so like I don't read a ton of newsletters, but I'm signed up for yours.
Well, it's not quantity, it's quality.
Mine's not quality.
Yours
not
is,
quantity
though.
either.
Yours is like full of bonus scenes and rereads and like insights into the writing process. Yours is so like conversational and approachable. And I'm like, no, there must be bullet points of facts.
Well, I think they're both great.
Yay, thank you.
So I'm looking at the time. We are definitely at our hour. So I'm going to take this last minute to just say a huge, huge thank you to our audience for joining us. This has been so much fun. For all of you who would like to get your hands on copies of A Little Too Familiar, I'm going to go ahead and relink. I'm also linking the Hellions Waltz, which is great. So go and follow those links. Go check those books out. So good. Let us know what you thought of this event in person or on any of our social media. We 110% of the time love to hear from you. Lish and Olivia, huge thank you for joining us. This is always such a joy. Do you have anything that you'd like to say before we wave goodbye?
No, but just, it's so nice to see Third Place Books logo pop up. Feels a little bit like coming home every time. So we miss you in person and we're glad to do this virtually.
Yay. Alrighty. Well, thank you one more time for coming. And with that, I think it's time for the awkward waving and good night. So, good night, everyone.